Well, so chaos, that's the other half of life, and it can turn into order, sometimes better order. That's actually what you do when you explore, right? You explore, you find out something new, not too Pandora boxy. You bite off as much as you can chew, but no more. And so that rearranges the way you look at the world, but you're doing it voluntarily, so you can kind of tolerate the recalibration. And you strengthen the order, right? Because now you become more competent. And I would say that you're trying to live on the edge between order and chaos. And I mean, that's a real place. That's it's a meta place. But it's more real than places, because it's so old. It's such an old place. It really exists, and your nervous system knows that. It sees the world this way. In fact, the right hemisphere is roughly specialized for chaos, and the left hemisphere is roughly specialized for order, which is why the left hemisphere tends to have the linguistic elements, and why people are right-handed. And the right hemisphere has a more diffuse structure. It's more associated with negative emotion and imagination, and the two communicate between each other through the corpus callosum, and the right hemisphere appears to update the left hemisphere kind of slowly, often in dreams. And so if you are hurt, if your right hemisphere is hurt, for example, back here in the parietal lobe, then you lose the left part of your body. You can't move it anymore, but you also lose the idea that you have a left part of your body. So it's like blindness. It's a blindness to the left. And so if someone comes along and says, you're not moving your left arm, you're going to say, yeah, well, my arthritis is bothering me today. You haven't moved it for 6 months. Well, my arthritis is bothering today. Or you're not moving your left foot. It's like, well, I'm too tired. Well, what's happened is the left hemisphere has a representation of the body, and it's not being updated because the part of the brain that would notice that the left is gone because of a stroke, it isn't there anymore. And so the left already has a model, and it's not going to change. It's hard to change your model of yourself. Have a tooth pulled. What happens? It's like your damn tongue is in that hole for the next 6 months, fiddling around constantly, and that's because you're rebuilding your neurological model of your body. It's like, try that with your whole left side and see how well you do. So this guy named Ramachandran was experimenting with people like this, and one of the things he did was he was checking their balance, and you can do that by irrigating the ear with cold water, and that makes people go like this, makes their eyes move back and forth because it upsets the vestibular system. And what he found was that if he poured cold water in the left ear of someone with right parietal damage who had left neglect, that they'd all of a sudden sort of wake up catastrophically. They'd have a terrible reaction to the fact that they were paralyzed on the left, and they would know that it had happened and cry and emit all sorts of distress, and no wonder. And then like 20 minutes later, they'd snap back into their damaged mode of being, and they would not deny, because that isn't really what it is that they couldn't update the model. They just didn't have the neurology for it anymore, so they were back to not noticing that it was gone and coming up with stories about it. And so that's a good example of how the right and left hemispheres work together and how they're kind of mapped onto this, weirdly enough. So, we're adapted to the meta reality. And so what that would be is we're adapted to that which remains constant across the longest spans of time. And that's not the same things that you see flitting around you day to day. They just like clouds, they're just evaporating, There's things underneath that are more fundamental, realities, like the dominance hierarchy, like the tribe, like the danger outside of society, like the threat that other people pose to you and that you pose to yourself. Those are eternal realities, and we're adapted to those. That's our world, and that's why we express that in stories. And so then you might say, well, how do you adapt yourself to this world? And the answer to that is, and I believe this is a neurological answer, I believe this, that your brain can tell you when you're optimally situated between chaos and order. And the way it tells you that is by producing the sense of engagement and meaning. So let's say there's a place in the environment you should be. Okay, what should that place be? Well, you don't want to be terrified out of your skull, like what good is that? And you know, you don't want to be so comfortable that you might as well sleep. You want to be somewhere where, you know, you're kind of on firm ground here, but over here, you're kind of testing out new territory. And some of you who are exploratory and emotionally stable, you know, you're going to go pretty far out into the unexplored territory without destabilizing yourself. And other people are going to just put a toe in the chaos. And, you know, that's neuroticism. Basically, that's your sensitivity to threat. That's calibrated differently in different people, and some people are more exploratory than others. That's kind of extroversion and openness working together, and intelligence. So some people are going to tolerate a larger admixture of chaos in their order. Those are liberals, by the way, and I mean that technically. Liberals are more interested in novel chaos, and conservatives are more interested in the stabilization of the structures that already exist. And who's right? Well, it depends on the situation, and that's why conservatives and liberals have to talk to each other, because one of them isn't right and the other wrong. Sometimes the conservatives are right and sometimes the liberals are right, because the environment's going like this. You can't predict the damn thing, so that's why you have to communicate, and that's what a democracy does. It allows people of different temperamental types to communicate and to calibrate their damn societies. So anyways, so let's say you're optimally balanced between chaos and order. So what does that mean? Well, you're stable enough, but you're interested, right? Because a little novelty heightens your anxiety. That wakes you up a bit. That's the adventure part of it. But it also focuses the part of your brain that does exploratory activity. And that's actually associated with pleasure. That's the dopamine circuit. And so if you're optimally balanced, and you know that you're there when you're listening to an interesting conversation or you're engaged in one. It's a real conversation. You know, you're saying some things you know, and the other person is saying some things they know, but both of what you know is changing. It's like, wow, that's so interesting. You'll have a conversation like that forever. Or maybe you're reading a book like that. Or you're listening to a piece of music that models that. Because what music does is provide you with predictable forms, multi-level predictable forms that transform just the right amount. And so music is a very representational art form. It says this is what the universe is like. You know, there's a dancing element to it, repetitive, and then cute little variations that sort of surprise and delight you, and you think, wow, that's so cool. And it doesn't matter how nihilistic you are, you know, music still infuses you with a sense of meaning, and that's because it models meaning. That's what it does. That's why we love it. And you know, you can dance to it, and that sort of symbolizes you putting yourself in harmony with these multiple layers of reality and positioning yourself properly. And you like that too, you know, you'll pay for it. Oh boy, I get to go dancing, you know. Oh boy, I get to listen to music. It's like, what the hell are you doing listening to music? What good is that? Well, you think that's a stupid question. I don't care about your dopey criticism. I'm going to listen to some music, right? There's no rational argument against music. It's like, you just don't even think about it. You just walk away from someone who's stupid enough to ask that question. It's like, some things are obvious. Well, why?